Hello, and welcome to part one of session 3, which is about submitting quality resources. My name is Matt Gill, and I work with the Department of Education in the assessment office. I am one of the state leads on the digital library project. So first off, I wanted to cover what actually the digital library is. It is an on-demand resource to help teachers address learning challenges and differentiate instruction. Common Core state standard tools and resources will be posted online and incorporated into the digital library. So the digital library is a formative assessment practices used to enhance day-to-day instruction and professional learning resources for teachers. It includes professional development materials and instruction resources aligned to the Common Core state standards and the Smarter Balanced Assessment System. And I got all these definitions just off of the Smarter Balanced homepage. So if you type in digital library, you can view the website yourself as well. Okay, just wanted to cover a couple of the expectations. I know this was part of your session 1 and session 2. So like I said, you'll remember this chart from session 1. This chart compares the general expectations of the SLT members with those of the SNE members. You are the SNE members, and there's 10 of us about that, or 7 or so of us that make up the SLT team. SLT members will oversee the development of a state-specific network of educators that will help review potential resources for the digital library. Educator networks will provide feedback on the development of formative assessment resources and professional learning tools. They will also serve as ambassadors to help states engage stakeholders with resources and trainings. Every SLT will work with about 10 SNEs, which is what you are. We will be setting up the SLT with who you'll be working with soon. So pretty soon I'll be sending out an email that'll say which SLT will be working with you. And also this PowerPoint will be placed on the wiki, so if you ever need to look back at this PowerPoint, you will always have access to it. And I just wanted to share this with you. This is the list of SLTs. So you will be set up with one of these people. And I know you've already seen this as well, but this is just the process of posting a resource again. So to ground us in the functionality of the digital library, let's review the process that allows a resource to appear in the digital library. So first off, you find a resource, it goes to the first SNE, and they use the gatekeeping criteria, which we'll talk about in the next webinar. And once it gets through that, then 3 other SNEs, or 2 other SNEs, including the first SNE, so there's 3 total, they will apply the quality criteria to it. And then after that, I'll go in the software, and then one of us SLT will review it. And if it makes it through every one of those reviews, then it will be posted into the digital library. So the resource could be sent back to the contributor after step 2, after step 4, or either before or after an SLT reviews it, depending on the combination of recommendations from the 3 SNE reviewers. And I will send this out in an email as well, but here's the site for our wiki. At this site, it'll contain the handouts and all the resources. It will also be the main way that we communicate with each other, ask questions, fill each other in. In this webinar, most of our time will be spent going over the cover profile, which you will have to complete for every resource that you contribute. So once you come up with a resource, you have to fill out the cover profile for it. And this entire webinar will just be over what the cover profile is and what you all need to include on that. And we will be having a couple of these webinars. There will be 2 webinars. This is the first one, then we'll have a second one. Therefore, the learning targets will be addressed over the course of the webinars. We're going to be focusing on 2 learning targets in this webinar. As you can see, the bulk of our time is going to be spent examining the components of a cover profile and understanding how to produce a high-quality profile that will meet the gatekeeping criteria. Throughout these 3 sections, we will use the term learning targets. You may be familiar with learning targets under different names like objectives or learning goals. You may have noticed learning targets and success criteria listed in sessions 1 and 2 as well. In all of these sessions, we are working to embed the formative assessment process. You will also notice the language around learning targets and success criteria within the digital library. The first topic in Section A is setting the stage, giving us some context for where we are now. Then we will discuss the components of a cover profile, as you will have to complete a profile for every resource you contribute. We want to make sure you understand what goes into a high-quality cover profile, so the likelihood of your resources getting posted in the digital library increases. The rigorous posting process starts with a good cover profile, which needs to make it through the gatekeeping criteria. So we will begin our practice by examining the cover profile template. On this slide, as in session 1 and 2, you see a reference to success criteria. This is perhaps another term that is new to you. Success criteria describes what success looks like when the learning target is reached. So you'll see the learning target is, I understand the components of an accurate and effective cover profile. Success criteria for this would be, I can explain the purpose and structure of the cover profile, and I can explain why each component of the cover profile is critical to the digital library. So if we are successful, you'll be able to do both of these things. This graphic should be familiar to you. It outlines the 4-part series that has been designed to help state leadership teams and state network of educators get a deeper understanding of the digital library's resource contribution and vetting process. Before this webinar, you viewed sessions 1 and 2, which are recorded 1-hour webinars. They're also on the wiki if you need to look back at them. Session 4 is also a recorded 1-hour webinar you will be able to access following this set of webinars. So after these 2 webinars, you'll be able to access session 4, which is talking about navigating the digital library. And what you're looking at right here is a high-level timeline of your training. Each training is approximately 6 hours long. So the 4 sessions we talked about on the previous slides are all part of training 1, which altogether equal about 6 hours. So you did session 1 and 2. This is session 3, this in the next webinar, and then we'll have a 4th recording, or another recording, which will be session 4. The format for training 2, 3, 4, and 5 have not yet been determined. All right, and you may have noticed that the cover profile is organized by 4 tabs: General Materials, Summary, and Tags. General, Materials, Summary, and Tags. At the end of session 2, you are asked to familiarize yourself with the cover profile, highlighting keywords or phrases, and identifying questions. At this time, you can write down your responses to these. So these questions you have on the screen right now, you can write down your responses. Then you can either email your questions to us, post them on the wiki, or save them for the future. Because right after these 2 webinars, we will have 3 Q&A sessions for you to, and you just go to one of them. You go to this Q&A. It's just a place where you can ask questions and we answer them for you. And so the questions that you have after these webinars, bring them to the Q&A, one of the Q&A sessions, and we'll hopefully be able to answer your questions. More information about the Q&A sessions will be coming after this webinar. Okay, and we're going to look at a non-interactive version of the cover profile so we can get familiar with the format and what information is included. After session 4, you will be accessing the cover profile online in the digital library. You might want to consider printing out the cover profile template so you can look back at these two documents side by side. The cover profile template can be found on the wiki. It's just called cover profile template. The cover profile consists of 4 tabs: General, Materials, Summary, and Tagging. These tabs will, of course, be interactive when you are live in the digital library. We're going to refer to the cover profile guide as we walk through the fields on the cover profile template. You will find the cover profile guide also on the wiki. I believe the name of it is something like Cover Profile Guide and Success or Gatekeeping Write-On or something like that. So make sure you have that one downloaded too and printed. It just gives you a guide and explains every one of the fields. All right, and as we review the fields of the cover profile, you will want to ask yourself the following questions throughout. So first thing you want to ask yourself is, why do you think this field is important? And then, who is this field important to? And what is this field important for? Okay, and like I said, this is just a picture of what the cover profile looks like, just so we can see all the what's part of all 4 of the tabs. So the fields in tab 1 prompt you for some general information about the resource. Choosing a title for your resource might seem like a no-brainer, but you actually want to be pretty thoughtful when you choose a title. This is one of the things that users are going to see when they search for a resource. You want to make sure the title is informative and interesting, so users will click on your resource and not pass over it because they don't understand what the resource is or how it may be used. If the resource has more than one file, you want to choose a title that reflects the resource as a whole. Titles should never be links or website names. All right, and if you have the cover profile guide printed out or on your computer, make sure to check out the second bullet. This gives an example of an effective and ineffective title for a resource. All right, and you were introduced to the 4 attributes of the formative assessment process during session 1. This field requires you to select which attributes of the formative assessment process are included in the resource. A resource does not need to have all 4 attributes in order to be considered a good resource. So please be thoughtful about which attributes are clearly evident in the resource. The third bullet in the cover profile guide reminds us of another important point. A resource may not explicitly reference the formative assessment process or name these 4 specific attributes. That is not a problem as long as you can contextualize how the resource utilizes the formative assessment process. This field refers to the formative assessment process with students, even in the context of a professional learning resource. The next section asks you to be a little more explicit about the attributes that apply to the resource. You need to describe how students are involved in clarifying intended learning, eliciting evidence, interpreting evidence, and/or acting on evidence. As you review your resource, you may have to review the resource and think deeply about how the resource helps educators engage students in the formative assessment process. Often, this is not explicitly stated in the resource. You will have to study the resource and understand how it helps educators engage or promote student engagement. For example, what activities or actions does the resource suggest that educators engage students in? How does the resource guide or help educators engage students in the process of interpreting evidence? As you review your resource, develop a response and include an example so that other educators get a concrete understanding of how the resource enables or promotes student engagement in the formative assessment process. Ultimately, on rare occasions, you may find that some resources do not actually help educators enable or promote student engagement. When this is the case, you can enter something to the effect of, this resource does not focus on helping educators engage students in the formative assessment process. This field requires you to identify the type of resource you are contributing. You can choose from instructional resource, professional learning resource, or a combination of instructional and professional learning. And for this, we ask that yours will mainly be focused on instruction or the instructional learning. Look at the definitions for each of these resource types in your cover profile guide. It is very important that you select the correct resource type, as this will determine which quality criteria are used to review the resource. A combination instructional and professional learning resource will require the reviewer to apply both quality criteria. It is sometimes difficult to determine whether a resource is truly a combination, though. In these cases, it is always best to err on the side of choosing either instructional resource or professional learning resource, and not combination. And like I said, we want you to focus more on the instructional resource. At this time, write down any questions that you have about tab 1. This way, then you can bring these questions to one of the Q&A webinars. Okay, so that was tab 1. Now we're going to go over tab 2, which is about materials. Please make sure that you are on page 2 of the cover profile guide. Here you will find guidance about the second tab. The Materials tab helps you confirm that a resource meets the appropriate legal guidelines to be posted in the digital library. The first field asks for the author of the resource. The second field asks for the owner of the resource. This may or may not be the same as the author. For example, a resource may have been written by Margaret Heritage, but it is owned by the National Center for Research on Evaluation, Standards, and Student Testing at UCLA. It is important to read the first 2 bullets in the section of the cover profile guide. With the exception of the URL, which are websites, listed in the cover profile and cover profile guide, all resources must be downloadable. The resource must not be dependent on a link. This will ensure that educators have long-term access to all of the resources. If you are contributing a resource, it is up to you to understand the licensing and copyright terms of the materials in the resource. Because we are educators and not lawyers, this is sometimes easier said than done. The cover profile guide provides you with some support to identify the correct licensing terms for your resource. It also tells you how to go about getting permission to use resources in the digital library. Although you have permission to link to several URL websites, you still must investigate the copyright terms for the individual videos found on those sites. One note, if you see a resource that is a copyright listed for non-commercial use only, you will need to procure a signed copyright clearance form. A help desk will also be available to answer your questions about licensing and copyright terms as you begin to fund and contribute resources. And this help guide, or this help desk, is an important resource to remember if you encounter any challenges with using the digital library. So if you have questions about copyright or any questions about the digital library, please contact this help desk and they will be able to help you. As you can see, she's very happy to help you. The last 2 fields under tab 2 require you to confirm the resource does not contain information related to specific students or would make a specific student identifiable. Any images of students require appropriate approval. At this time, write down any questions you have about tab 2 so that you can bring them to one of the Q&A webinars. All right, we'll start with tab 3 now. So please make sure that you are on page 4 of the cover profile guide. There you will be able to find guidance about the 3rd tab. The resource summary and the title entered under tab 1 are the most important fields to the digital library users. They will see these 2 pieces of information anytime they search for a resource. Although you have 600 characters to write a resource summary, only the first 140 characters will show up in the search. The user will have to click on a resource to read the whole summary. So make those first 140 characters count. We all have very busy schedules, so it is very helpful if we can minimize browsing time for our colleagues. Providing a descriptive title and thoughtful summary will make your resource easier to find and minimize the chances that a user skips over your resource because he or she is unclear about what the resource contains and doesn't have the time to dig deeper. For this field, you need to describe the context in which the resource could best be used. This field may influence how you tag this resource on tab 4 of the cover profile. These two fields require you to explain how the resource is connected to the Common Core state standards and the formative assessment process. Each contributed resource must connect to the formative assessment process in some way. Even resources focused on the Common Core state standards should connect to at least one attribute of the formative assessment process and show how it is reflected in instructional practice. In addition, although a resource may not explicitly state the connections, for example, provide specific standards or reference particular attributes of the formative assessment process, you can identify and explain these connections. These fields may be especially helpful to a reviewer because they tie closely to aspects of the quality criteria. You are required to identify learning targets and success criteria for each resource. Whether these are for adult learners or students depends on the type of resource that is being contributed. The cover profile guide will help you make this determination. As you can see from the learning target and success criteria presented at the beginning of the section, our format is I understand for learning targets and I can for success criteria. The last two fields under the tab require you to provide information about the potential effectiveness of a resource. How has the resource impacted adult learning, instruction, or student outcomes? Supporting evidence is where you spell out your personal experience using the resource. You may not have any to say in this field if you have not used the resource yet. However, we encourage you to either utilize the resource yourself or have a colleague implement the resource before contributing it to the digital library. Even though you might not have a lot of supporting evidence, you must specifically point to the principles, literature, and or research that support the content and effectiveness of the resource. At this time, write down any questions you have about tab 3 so that you can bring them up in one of the Q&A webinars. The last tab is tags. This is tab 4. Tagging is going to be covered during session 4 of this first training series, so we are not going to spend a lot of time going in depth with the tab today. However, I cannot overstate how important tagging is to the flow of the resource posting process and the functionality of the digital library. The digital library software uses tags to route resources to the appropriate viewers. Tagging also makes it easier for a user to find a resource. Now that we have had an overview of all the cover profile fields, we're going to zoom in on some key fields and practice completing those fields together in reference to a particular resource. So the learning target for this next part is I understand the components of an accurate and effective cover profile. So once you are successful at this, you should be able to, so when contributing a resource, you should be able to write detailed responses in the cover profile fields to support the review of the resource. And that's that I can statement. And these next slides, just going to skip over them right now. All right, we will begin Section C, but most of Section C will be held in the second webinar of Session 3. The cover profile is important because it provides information to the reviewers that helps them determine whether the resource should be posted in the digital library. You have seen an overview of the posting process in the past sessions and may remember the first review in the posting process is when you would apply the gatekeeping criteria. Section C will be spent working with the gatekeeping criteria in connection to the cover profile. The learning target for this is, I understand the importance of the cover profile in the review process. We have 2 success criteria. I can accurately determine whether a resource passes the gatekeeping criteria, and this we will cover in the second webinar. And then also I can explain how the correct identification of resource types affects the vetting process. As you will recall from Session 2, the cover profile is referenced by the gatekeeping criteria. In the following exercise, you will have the opportunity to compare 2 versions of a cover profile for the same resource. The resource in this instance is a video. Remember, you can add videos from YouTube, Vimeo, SchoolTube, TeacherTube, and SlideShare to the digital library. We're going to watch the video once together. You can access the video via this link in case you need to watch it again. We will put this video up on the wiki as well. So at this time, from the wiki, you'll be able to find cover profile A and cover profile B. They are 2 sample cover profiles to go with this video. And then what you will be doing is comparing both, or comparing and contrasting, cover profile A to cover profile B. So at this time, before we start the video, you can take a moment to read through cover profile A and cover profile B. And I will get the video going. So bear with me.
The first person are those of you who are doing your best to move conversation along.
The students in Julia St. Martin's 10th grade English Language Arts class are using the fishbowl protocol today.
Your 5 minutes begin now.
Their goal? To cite specific evidence from informational text to support their reasoning. In class, students have been reading Fahrenheit 451, along with a collection of informational articles focused on literacy. In the fishbowl, students are asked to discuss specific themes common to both the novel and the article.
We're really honing in or focusing on 2 guiding questions. Why read, and what is the world without books? I expect for us to be really smart and articulate about using this expert text, New York City Disconnected Youth Literacy Initiative. I'm also hoping that today you can use Fahrenheit 451 to really push us to have a smart conversation about why read, what is the world without books. We should have the following people in the inner circle. Tiffany, Dimitri. We use the fishbowl protocol today to really allow students both in the inner circle and outer circle to feel accountable for the conversation and discussion. Outer circle. Here's what I need you to be really smart about today. I want you to track on your sticky notes the ideas that your peers use that show evidence from a text to move their logic.
Okay. So, what's the first guiding question? I connected that to the article about the characteristics of urban schools because it told me that students are less likely to read and do homework and more likely to watch TV, and they also have lower test scores. I kind of took that to why read, because if we don't read, then we won't have the knowledge that we need to go out in the world and do other things with it. So then, like how in the text, how they have to go with the TV.
So Sydney, you're doing a great job, but I want to, again, reiterate that I really want to to you guys making smart conversation around a specific text. I want to make sure we know the title of the article and just frame it for us so that we're all on the same page.
Like an example from the streets in the library.
We've already spent a good 2 to 3 class lessons with this text. It was really time to show their understanding of the text and really see a connection to our guiding question. All right, outer circle. So you are responding, you are building, you are also holding folks accountable for their use of expert text to move their ideas. Anissa.
Every person that they try to refer to their text that we got in class and connect it to the guiding question.
Olivia?
Something that people can work on and try to put in the vocabulary words.
Yeah. So, round 2. When I pick informational text for kids, I'm thinking about 2 things, relevance and complexity. One of the informational texts that kids used today was a pretty complex text. New York City disconnected kids were really pushed to use data, numbers, and percentage to really rationalize and prove their argument.
Middle school or high school, you begin.
I also chose a less complex text so that all kids could participate and feel smart about the dialogue that kids were having today.
In the article, Ray Bradbury in Learning to Future Generation, he talks about how the world that's a question because they're engrossed in these television shows and books. Books can take you to new places that you never knew existed and open up new ideas.
What I was most impressed with in our students was their ability to support their ideas with a great sound body of evidence.
The only reason why people thought books were bad was because the fireman was telling them, oh, there's nothing.
And kids were also moving themselves towards using events from the novel to support their ideas as well.
Well, everybody that spoke had great expert text connections. They knew what they were talking about. They didn't just read it and say this connects to this. They actually showed proof.
Olivia automatically jumped in and connected it to the novel very well. And I also want to give a shout out to Pedro because I think she did a great job in switching the question and also backing it up with good evidence.
Inner circle, begin.
So I selected why read and what is the word without books. The expert that came in the site for the librarian. And she was talking about how
Another interesting thing that happened is kids were using notes that they gathered from an expert who came to our class. I just thought that kind of connected to what is the world without books, because it's not like we're really without books, but to have some of them taken away or taking information out of the books that we actually wanted to read, that makes you feel like, why should you read in a way?
I think that was a really good point, and it connects to one of my articles titled New York City Disconnected Few Literacy Initiatives, where it said access to more educational options is something that urban schools need more. The few sources that we do have, some of them, like the example we had with the girl who went to the library and one of the uncensored versions of books didn't have it. Some of those few educational options that we have aren't active, which is something that may affect why aren't more human schools and universities. Right, like that.
Outer circle?
Everybody in the whole circle talking, everybody contributes.
I like to have Danielle related or took facts out of the presentation when the slides first came.
I feel like the truth is the best out of all 3 of us because I saw the power was being used and everyone talked and participated and it actually flowed like a real conversation. There wasn't like a pause where no one talked.
Great. So we're going to now race into debrief circle. What were some takeaways for the importance of using evidence to move our conversation? It's important to have evidence from different texts and novels because it lets people know, you know what you're talking about. You say stuff that you're talking about, you really care about it.
It also helps us connect back to the guiding question so we can explain what we read. I think our class did really well today with looking at the expert text and using it in the conversation. I also want to say I like the feedback that people in the outside circle gave because it gave groups after the ones that already done something that I didn't mind of what they should improve on or do a little better.
Excellent. I think that's great. So just one quick reminder on homework, because I do have time. Tonight's homework, you're going to finish reading Fahrenheit 451, Book 1. You have a quiz tomorrow. I will collect your rubrics and your self-assessment sheets tomorrow, and we're going to quiz.
Okay, and before the next webinar, we have a little bit of homework for you. So we just asked you to compare and contrast the two cover profile examples. So like I said, they're on the wiki. You can look at both of them there. You can print them. Just a couple questions to think about while you're looking at them. First, for what do you notice about cover profile A? What strengths do you see? Which, if any, fields seem incomplete? Where could the contributor have included more information? So you can answer these questions about cover profile A, which is on that fishbowl video. So what this is, let's just say a teacher posted that video or put that video and they filled out their cover profile. Then you as an SNE are reviewing that teacher's resource. So this is practice at what you will be doing. So you'll be going through it, asking yourself these questions, and then just ask that you do the exact same thing for cover profile B. So same thing with B. What do you notice about cover profile B? What strengths do you see? And which fields are incomplete if there are any? And where could the contributor have included more information? And then also write down which cover profile is better and more complete. And in the next webinar, we will review this. We'll review the two profiles, cover profile A and cover profile B, and we'll also review the gatekeeping criteria. So that will be in the next webinar. And this is all, we'll be covering all this in the next webinar, so I'm just going to flip ahead to the end right now. Okay. And if you do have any questions, please email me or Jan Martin, or you can give us a call. There's our phone numbers, there's our email addresses, and there's the wiki one more time. If you ever need to get to the wiki, it's open to all, so you'll be able to get to the wiki. And all of this will be on that wiki, so just make sure you go there for any questions. And also, we just ask if you can please complete the online session survey so we can learn from your feedback. All right, thank you, and let us know if you have any questions. I will send following emails up to you, and also I will give you information about those upcoming question and answer webinars. All right, have a good day. Bye.